Good morning, everybody. This is Truth Seeker here. It's kind of an interesting coincidence that Lloyd picked up the topic of 40 places in the Bible or 40 instances in the Bible where the science contradicts what the Bible states. And I don't think that you necessarily need 40 examples of that to discredit the Bible. Like Lloyd acknowledged, all it really takes is one example and a good sound example of where the Bible is incorrect on science for the whole Bible to be discredited. Because the whole Bible, especially when you talk about the book of Genesis, is founded on this one book, because the whole idea, the whole concept, the theme of the Bible rests on the foundation of Genesis, the purpose of God for man, as explained in this book. And you have the creation and the foundation of the creation, the fall. You have this permission of evil and sin, and the demonstration of thousands of years of what happens when society is subjected to these conditions, and then the redemption and the intent for man's blessing and happiness, living in bliss forever and ever in the future. Most Christian sects, whether you believe that heaven is some place up with God, or whether or not that paradise is earth, as the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Bible students believe that humanity is going to live on earth forever in perfect bliss and perfect conditions, and forever happy on this planet, forever and ever and ever, time never ending. Well, even the idea that time never ending isn't consistent with what we understand of the universe. I mean, the sun only has so much fuel, and what do we do when the sun runs out and it novas and the earth is burnt to a crisp? We don't even have to wait for the earth to burn to a crisp. They're talking scientists, astrophysicists who understand the mechanics of stars, say as the larger elements are created through the fusion process at the core, the larger the element is that's fused, the more energy is given off, and so the sun's energy output increases over time, becomes the energy output becomes greater, and at some point in the next billion years, that energy output from the sun will be so great that it evaporates the oceans from off the earth. And so even despite the fact that the sun may have enough fuel to last for another 5 billion years, only a billion years from now, the earth will be toast. There won't be any water. We can't survive without water. How's this idea of an eternal bliss on earth going to ever come about? Oh, well, don't worry about that. God will fix it all. You see, God is the magic fix for everything, despite the fact that we have no evidence that God even exists. And to the contrary, the things that we understand from the Bible suggest that the Bible is a man-made product. Not only suggests, but strongly indicates that the Bible is a man-made book, man-made creation, a fabrication, give people an identity, the Hebrews largely, the Old Testament, and to basically keep people under control. I mean, that when a priest class arises within a culture, they use religion and holy books and principles that contain in the book as a mechanism to control the laity, those people that are outside of this privileged class. But looking at the Bible in Genesis alone is enough to discredit the entire Bible. We don't have to spend all of our lives and all of our time trying to find where the Bible is inconsistent. It's like how science works. When Isaac Newton performed experiments that suggested that light behaves as a wave, then scientists began looking for this medium through which the wave propagates. Now, no wave that was ever observed up to that point ever could be without a medium through which it travels. For example, water. You throw a stone in a pond or a lake, you disturb the water. You've transmitted the energy of the stone into the water, and it sends ripples out across the water. Those ripples are energy. That's energy being transmitted through the water, and through the interaction of molecules having an effect, an impact on other molecules, and that it propagates according to a certain speed across the pond. Sound uses air, compression waves, and so the air is compressing at high frequency, and that's what we call sound, but it needs air to travel through. And so all wave action, all wave phenomena requires a medium. And when they discovered that light acted as a wave, scientists just presumed that there was this medium through which the light traveled. But this medium, which they called ether, not ether, the gas that puts you out or makes you high, but this ether is the medium through which the light traveled, and it would have to have some incredible properties for light. And so these scientists that postulated that this ether existed suggested that this ether was transparent to matter, that matter moved through it without restriction, that it was extremely rigid because light was fast. The more rigid the medium, the faster the wave travels through the medium. And because light was very fast, it had to have been a very rigid medium. And so they had this strange stuff, but nobody had any evidence that this existed. So they looked for this ether, and by the end of the 19th century, they were looking for a long time for this stuff. Two American physicists, Michelson and Morley, came up with an experiment with a device called an interferometer that would demonstrate the existence of ether. And I won't go into the details of the experiment, but the experiment failed. It was a null result. In other words, they didn't see the ether. Light was found to travel at the same speed, and no matter what direction they were looking. And later, not too many years later, it was only a matter of years, Einstein, a young man by the name of Albert Einstein, came out with a theory, a special theory of relativity, that explained readily that light could travel without necessarily having a medium for it. So, or at least this medium called an ether. And so with one fell swoop, the whole concept of ether was dispensed, and no scientist with any credibility whatsoever, they would postulate new experiments for ether, and they would be considered a crank in science. Otherwise, it was proven definitively with one experiment, once and for all, that there wasn't any need anymore to look for ether. The same is with the Bible. If you can show conclusively that the Bible does not describe, let's say, some scientific phenomena correctly, then that's enough to discredit the Bible. You don't have to spend all your life and the rest of time looking for other discrepancies or to sort out. Well, I guess if you're an apologist, you'll want to find ways to make the Bible credible, but it only takes one circumstance. You don't need evidence after evidence after evidence to disprove the Bible, and that can be done readily with Genesis. And most people who go at the inconsistencies of the Bible go for the fourth creative day. Although every single creative day can be analyzed and looked at and found to be inconsistent with an understanding of nature. For example, on the first day it says the earth in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void. Well, the earth was never without form. When you look at how the earth was, astronomers explain how the earth and the solar system came to be. The sun was an aggregation of gas that came together through gravitational forces to a point where a fusion process could take place at its core. And then, because of this great mass, you've created a gravitational field around the sun such that it pulls in matter. And if you've ever had a swimming pool, a circular swimming pool that had full of leaves, if you make a whirlpool in the pool, all the leaves gravitate toward the center of the pool. You don't have to vacuum the whole pool. You just make a whirlpool, and then everything moves to the middle, and then you vacuum the middle. That's the way the solar system worked. You had all this orbiting material. The lighter materials were on the outer rims of the solar system, and the heavier rocky material on the inside, and that is why we have the inner planets, which are rocky, and the outer planets, which are gaseous. And these rocks were in an accretion disk around the sun initially, and began to pull together through gravitational attraction, and they formed the core of the Earth. And as time progressed, the Earth aggregated, and it was never without form. Things always come together in the form of a sphere. A sphere is a shape in nature that through gravitational attraction is a form that naturally forms. Spheres is what minimizes the energy. It has the conservation of energy properties that result in things becoming spherical, and even small planetoid type things like Ceres out in the asteroid belt, when they're in aggregate, they come together more as a sphere. And so there was never a point in time when the Earth existed without form. The Earth, right there from the outset, the Bible is not consistent with what we know took place in the early formation of the solar system. And then it makes the presumption that the Earth was void, I guess void of life, but that says waters, the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the deep, and it suggests that there was this great body of water that completely covered the whatever constituted the Earth. And it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and it's not consistent, certainly not very clearly consistent with what science knows about the formation of our solar system. But then most who go at the credibility of the Bible and try to show inconsistency with the Bible go to the fourth creative day, and that's where apologists are most prepared. I mean, starting from Charles Taze Russell for the Jehovah's Witnesses and Bible students, Russell, when he put out the Photodrama of Creation, he called it a religio-scientific documentary of God's plan of the ages. He tried to pass it off as credible science, and he used a postulate or a hypothesis that was put forth from a Quaker school teacher who taught geology, and he printed a pamphlet in 1874 that was a theory that he was trying to sell about the Earth being surrounded by rings similar to Saturn, and that these rings collapsed into the Earth, and that the last ring was a ring of water, and the water. So he was formulating a theory that was consistent with the Bible. He wasn't trying to. He was looking for something that supported the Bible, and Russell latched onto this and called it science. But it wasn't science. It was never accepted by the scientific community, even back in that day. It was considered a crank. So it was wrong for Russell to pose this photodrama creation as a scientific explanation of the formation of the Earth. But when opponents of the Bible go to the fourth creative day, they note that the sun and the moon and the stars could never have been made after the Earth. And that's a huge discrepancy right then and there. And apologists always fall back on the idea that the Earth's atmosphere was opaque, that it was cloudy, and that the sun and the moon and the stars simply couldn't be seen, and that the Earth's atmosphere cleared on that fourth day so that the lights could be seen. These heavenly bodies could be seen. And even to this day, a notable astronomer, notable among Christians, that is, because he's one of the few scientists with a PhD that is an astronomer who defends the Bible, and he has a website, and he addresses the fourth creative day because that's the one that most people go at when they attempt to show that Genesis is incorrect. And so Hugh Ross, basically, he doesn't provide a lot of information on the website. He's selling books, and he's selling the books to obviously he's trying to make a little money, and to give Christians an idea that he's giving them a credible scientific explanation for the fourth creative day. And he, on his webpage, he has a 5-minute video clip where he defends the fourth creative day, because that's the one that most people who try to discredit Genesis go after the inconsistency of the fourth creative day. And he addresses that in this video clip where he says, God never said he made the sun and the moon and the stars. Well, that is an outright lie. He says that all that God said was, let there be lights in the heavens for times and seasons and such. And he says that God never said he made these things. Well, that is absolutely incorrect, because what he omits, and let me go to the scriptural reference to it. The scriptural reference in Genesis, it says, on the fourth day, it says, and God said, let there be lights in the firmament. And this is what Hugh Ross is referring to. God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day and the night, and let them be for signs, seasons, days, and years. And then he stops there. He said he doesn't talk about the rest of the account. And he omits the 16th verse where it says, and God made two great lights, to rule the day and the lesser to rule the night. And the word made is in that context. And that word made is a Hebrew word, asa. And there are two words throughout the Genesis account of creation, asa and bara, that are both translated created and made. And asa is usually translated made, and bara usually created, but they're used interchangeably in both the first chapter of Genesis and the second chapter of Genesis for the same thing. The action of causing something to come into existence that did not exist prior to that action. So that is a clear discrepancy and omission made on the part of these apologists that is completely wrong. They will not address that. That is not an honest approach. They would have to address that word asa, God made, which means to form or to make. That's the definition of the word. And so, why would that word, in that one instance, where in every other instance where it's used, be translated or mean something differently in that one case, when it clearly means made, an action to make, in every other case? And in fact, furthermore, if it meant that the sun and the moon and the stars became visible, as they offer up in their argument, their defense, there is a word already on the third creative day, just the previous creative day, that means just that. So if God meant that the sun, the moon, and the stars became visible in the sky on the fourth creative day, he would have used the word that meant to be made visible. And that word is used in the third creative day when he says, and God gathered the waters, and he said, and made the dry land appear. So when you look at that third creative day, and it talks about the creation of land, or it says in the 9th verse, and God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together in one place, and let the dry land appear. That word appear is ra'ah, and it means to be made visible. So why didn't God use that? If he knows that word exists, and he used that word in the previous day regarding land, why didn't he use that word with regard to the sun and the moon and the stars? That word ra is nowhere within that context in that creative day. But instead, the word asa is to make. And we know that the sun and the moon and the stars could never have been made after plants or after the earth was made. So right there, the Bible is discredited. But so many apologists avoid accepting any argumentation with regard to the fourth creative day. They overlook it, they omit it. It's not honest. But we also have another big discrepancy, and as big a discrepancy with the third creative day as we do with the fourth creative day, and that's with plants. And it talks about, here it says, on the third creative day, after land appeared, it said, God said, let the earth bring forth grass and the herb yielding seed and the tree yielding fruit after its kind. And so it's talking about angiosperms, fruiting, flowering plants. And that is clear. And that word fruit in the third creative day is the same word fruit that's used in the context, in the second chapter of Genesis, in the context of Adam and Eve partaking of the fruit of the Garden of Eden. And that word fruit is the same word as used here in the third creative day. So it's clear he's talking about fruiting, flowering plants. And yet, this is something that happened on the third creative day, and then the fourth creative day we already talked about, the sun, the moon, and the stars. He didn't get around to making animal life, complex animal life, until the fifth creative day. He made birds and great whales, it says, and the apologists say, that word great whales means great land monsters too, so those are the dinosaurs. Well, the fact of the matter is that they have plants, especially a special type of plant, angiosperms, made 2 whole creative days before animal life appeared on the earth. And in fact, when you look at angiosperms in the geologic record, they did not come into existence until the Cretaceous period, which began 150 million years ago. It's the last period prior to our modern era. It's the last period of the dinosaurs. There were mammals that existed. There were dinosaurs, a very complex ecological system of dinosaurs, and fruiting trees, angiosperms, fruiting plants, flowering plants that did not exist prior to the Cretaceous period. So during the Jurassic period, the Triassic, Permian, the Cambrian explosion, all of those sea creatures, hundreds of millions of years of animal life transpired before fruiting trees came into the evolutionary picture. That is simply the fact. And there is no arguing that point. It's clear that it's talking about fruit. And so here is another very important, you can't dismiss this. This is not a dismissive point. That if you take the Bible literally, and if God is the writer, the ultimate author, he should be consistent with what we know. And if it isn't, we can discredit it immediately. We don't need 40 other points of inconsistencies. Not that I'm criticizing that. I think it's great. I think you could find more than 40. I think you could find many, many ideas. I mean, right now we have an understanding of the universe that suggests that the universe is infinite. And if the universe is infinite, that completely discredits the Bible right then and there, if you think of the implications of what an infinite universe would be to the Bible. That would mean Jesus would have to be sacrificed over and over again, an infinite number of times, and it just doesn't make sense. Yet we have good, solid mathematical evidence that a multiverse, not only an infinite universe, but a multiverse, is possible. And in fact, that there are 4 potential levels of multiverse. You have Hugh Everett's what they call many worlds theory from quantum mechanics, and you have string theory, where they advance it to brain theory, the membranes that collide, and when they collide, they give off energy that becomes a universe. And then you have another budding universes, each an infinite universe that buds off another universe an infinite number of times. So the idea of fractals. And so we have the mathematics. Now, to say, oh, well, that's just supposition. Well, Einstein, when he solved his general field equations back in 1915, he used an approximation method. He couldn't solve them directly. Yet he sent the equations out, and a young German physicist fighting in the trenches of World War I, Karl Schwarzschild, he was a brilliant mathematician, and he got exact solutions to Einstein's equations. And the implications of those solutions suggested some physical anomaly that otherwise could not be seen. And this physical anomaly occurred when there was so much mass that it would collapse in on itself into a singularity, creating a realm around it that the laws of physics as we know it break down. We call that an event horizon today, and the singularity we know as a black hole. Back then they called it a Schwarzschild singularity. And for 100 years, people were fighting over whether or not a black hole could exist. Einstein never bought into the idea. He never thought that matter could behave in such a way. But there were other physicists who followed the mathematics and began compiling evidence. And looking at some of the properties that these black holes might have, and so they could look for these properties. Stephen Hawking talked about an evaporation, a radiation that came off these black holes, and there were other features that became apparent through the study of the mathematics. And slowly but surely over time, evidence started coming in that suggested that black holes might be real. And it wasn't until 2015 with the LIGO, the large-scale interferometer that was proposed by the brilliant physicist Kip Thorne, that it was absolutely beyond any question proven that black holes exist, that they're a part of our nature, they're a part of our universe, they're there, they exist, and they found the merging of 2 black holes creating gravitational waves, and they detected that with this large-scale interferometer, and they proved that they exist. So it took 100 years for that to happen. We're at the beginning stages of understanding of multiverses. And eventually, at some point, we're going to come to the bottom of the truth of the matter. But all the evidence at this point suggests that the universe is infinite. And if that occurs, right there, the Bible is null and void. The Bible is null and void right now because it just does not explain scientific fact correctly. So that, I think, is enough. I don't think we need... It's like the ether. We don't need experiment after experiment to prove that the ether didn't exist. It was just one experiment, Michelson-Morley, that showed that light didn't need a medium to transmit through. Einstein's theory of relativity was enough for that. So with that, I don't think we need a point-by-point analysis of Genesis to prove the inaccuracy of Genesis, and that it's not supported by science, and that those apologists who do say that it is consistent are omitting important points, things that they overlook, and that's not being honest or credible. Any credible scientist does not omit such an important point as what Hugh Ross did in his little video on his website. I tried to comment once, and he wouldn't put my comment on his webpage. I think because he couldn't put any, couldn't rebut it. So anyway, I hope this has been beneficial to you. Like I said, I've been engaged in a debate over this. I think I'm going to come to a close with this individual with whom I'm debating. I've been debating with him over the last week and a half, and I think just spinning wheels. That's all we're doing. And now he's gotten down to throwing obscure scriptures and weirdness at me to show that I don't know enough of the Bible as he does. You don't need to be a scholar. I bow to his knowledge on the Bible, but it doesn't make the Bible any more credible. That's basically it. I'm with Lloyd. All you need is one discrepancy, because if the Bible was made by the guy who created everything, it would be consistent with what we know to be true through science. So anyway, this is Truth Seeker wishing you a very good day.